Good evening, everybody. How are you? Well, today we are going to be exploring the life of Flora McDonald. As you notice, the background is the McDonald tartan in the ancient weave. Now, Miss Flora grew up in the Western Isles of Scotland. This includes the outer Hebrides, and the Isle of Skye is where she sailed to with a distinguished young man who thought he could get a king back on the throne. Now, Flora was born to Ronald and Marion McDonald. Ronald was a tacksman. Now, a tacksman, for those of you who don't know, he is known as a gentleman farmer. So she was a gentle lady. She grew up with some money. She was not poor. Her life was pleasant enough until her father died when she was young. Following her father's passing, her mother Marion married another gentleman by the name of Hugh McDonald of Armadale. Now, I want you to remember Hugh McDonald of Armadale because he plays an important part in her story. Hugh had earlier soldiered successfully on the continent and was an expert swordsman and shot. Flora, like all ladies of that time, had no formal education. None. Except for the accomplishments that would distinguish a gentlewoman of that period, including reading, writing, singing, dancing, and embroidery. And if you look at this lovely portrait of her, that well-bred manner is on full display. Yeah, full display. A local cleric would describe Flora's behavior in company as easy, modest, and well-adjusted, or composed.
Something we're not.
Do you know those words?
No. No, Pat wouldn't do that. No. Flora was also bilingual. She spoke Gaelic and she spoke Scots with ease and without an accent, which was quite unusual for the time. Very unusual. But in the summer of 1746, this 24-year-old woman's life was about to hit a major change. You see, in the summer of 1746, the Western Isles were surrounded by English militia on behalf of the crown. There were several vessels in a channel called the Minge. And these vessels had been sent there to look for a certain prince. And that was Prince Charles. We know him as the Young Pretender, and at the time that he was hiding up in the Western Isles, he was a fugitive with a price on his head. The price was 30,000 pounds, which was an enormous amount. It's probably around $50,000, I would imagine, if I've got that correct. Prince Charles had made several attempts to get the British throne back, but he failed miserably in his attempts. And since late April, he had been skulking or moving about stealthily in a variety of refuges in the Western Isles. Now, with the threat of real danger from the crown, Hugh McDonald of Armadale, he comes back up again. Flora's stepfather, sent a message to the royal party because Hugh was loyal to the crown. And he, at the time, it seemed pretty impossible for Prince Charles to conceal himself any longer. Hugh suggested sending his stepdaughter, Flora, to meet the royal party. Now, lo and behold, Flora did not know of any of this. Surprise. Hugh suggested that if His Royal Highness would dress in women's clothes, then he might pass for Flora's maidservant. And they would sail across the Minch to the other island called Long Island, and from there the party would sail to Skye. Hugh then suggested that Neil, who was a cousin of Flora's, be appointed to take care of both the mistress and her maid on the journey. Meanwhile, Flora knew nothing of this plan. It wasn't until somebody knocked on her door late at night that she found out what her role was going to be in this endeavor. Around midnight on that fateful evening, Flora was quietly sleeping in her house when a knock at the door awakened her. There, she met a Colonel O'Neill, one of several men traveling with the prince, who told her the scheme that her stepfather had devised. And he, Colonel O'Neill, wanted only her agreement for this scheme to take place. Well, quite frankly, she answered Colonel O'Neill with a resounding no. I'm not getting involved in that. That's way too dangerous. Well, little beknownst to her that Colonel O'Neill brought the prince with him. And Colonel O'Neill kept pressing her for a yes. And it wasn't until the prince stepped out of the shadows that and guaranteed her safety that Flora said yes. Her stepfather also had provided passports for them to go to the Isle of Skye. Now, they needed those passports because the English were sure to stop them. And they needed permission to get through the blockades, basically. And of course, she said yes. So, Bonnie Prince Charlie was going to dress as a maidservant. Well, lo and behold, there were no women's clothes that he would fit in. So it took Flora and several other women several days to actually make a dress and a cape with a hood and different accoutrements that a maidservant would need. So on June the 30th, Flora, the prince, and Colonel O'Neill sailed for Skye. And once they got on Skye, they were to meet the wife of a clan's chief because she was going to help them hide the prince. But lo and behold, when they got there, she had an English lieutenant at her house. This lieutenant was in search of the prince. Little did he know he was sitting at the dock on the Isle of Skye. So the boating party decided to leave the prince on the boat, and Flora was sent to the chieftain's wife's house with instructions to keep that lieutenant occupied while the others decided the best way to get the prince to safety. So finally, the boating party came up with a plan, and Flora was relieved of her duties. And some sources state that the prince gave Flora his beautiful French garters that he wore under the maid's costume for her service. And he had hoped that they would meet again. They never met again. Never did they meet. Meanwhile, Prince Charlie tried and failed. His army was soundly defeated at Culloden. Hundreds of Highlanders were killed, and Charles ran for his safety. This was the beginning of the end for the Highland way of life. Charles eventually made his way to France and never returned to Scotland. He died in Rome at the age of 67. And some of the biographies that I read said that he died alone and he was an alcoholic. Yeah. Now, Flora's job was done, but the English were not done with her. On July the 12th, Flora was arrested and questioned by the English, and she was kept prisoner aboard several different ships before being sent to London in November. And by the time the English had released her from prison, a year had passed. She was released in 1747. She later married Alan McDonald, with whom she had 5 children, and she died on March 4th, 1790, after an illness. Now, the Scots made her very famous with paintings and postcards and scent bottles and dolls and Staffordshire figurines and needlebooks that had her name on them. And needlebook was exactly what you think it was. You kept your needles in it for sewing. There were hand-painted fans. And there was even a dance created and named after her. There is also a bronze statue of her in front of Inverness Castle. Now, the Isle of Skye is where Flora is buried. And this is Flora's memorial on the island of Skye. There is a famous song that was written about her helping Bonnie Prince Charlie, and you may know it as the Skye Boat song. And if you're an Outlander fan, you definitely know it's the Skye Boat song, which they reworded. She and Alan had a nice life. They decided in 1774 they were very deep in debt, and so they decided to emigrate to America. Yeah. So they emigrated to America, and Alan McDonald fought for the British during the American Revolution. He fought at the Battle of Moores Creek, and that charge was unsuccessful for the British, and many men, including Alan, her husband, were taken prisoner. Well, that left the women at home, and they had their houses were robbed, and they feared for their lives. So Flora managed to get her family to safety in New York. Finally, she was reunited with her husband. And in 1778, she followed him to Nova Scotia. Now, that winter was very harsh in Nova Scotia, and it affected her health badly. And she decided she had had enough, and she sailed back to Scotland. Alan did not join her until 1784. Flora's health was never the same after that. She was in constant pain from an arm that was broken during the trip to Scotland, and it was a break that had not set properly, and on March the 4th, 1790, she died after an illness. So here she was, somebody who took an espionage job, who lived to tell the tale. I think she was very lucky to get out of the English hands. Of course, when the English questioned her, she always said that she did not know anything. And it was finally until her great-granddaughter sat down with her and wrote down her autobiography, which I found on the internet. It's on the Internet Archive. Very interesting read. Very interesting read. Here are some of the sources that I used. I used Flora McDonald, Pretty Young Rebel by Flora Fraser, who is named after Flora McDonald. Miss Fraser did an excellent job researching, full of facts, full of facts. I also went to EBSCO, which is a great website for papers, and I went to Live at Library at the University of Cincinnati, who also had a wonderful article on Flora herself. So if you're interested, I would suggest this book for a great read. It does have some fabulous pictures in it. It has pictures of the Staffordshire figures. It has pictures of the hand-painted fan. It tells more and more about her life after Prince Charlie and how she got involved with Prince Charlie. That's all I have about Flora.
Any news about the money? Was there anything in there about the money that she hid
Yes.
coming to the United States?
No, but I know that when they decided to come to the United States, they were flat broke. They were in debt. So I don't know where she was getting the money. At least I
Just
didn't
a
get
rumor.
that. At least I didn't get that far.
It might have been a rumor.
Might have been a rumor, but they were flat broke. And even though she had a patronage, she had a really good friend who gave her money. I mean, they were set. So I don't know what she and Alan decided to do with the money, whether they invested it in the farm and that farm failed, which was quite possible. Quite possible.
So the children of that union, the 5 children, they've gone on and they've written books like this Fraser lady. And
I don't think Flora Fraser is related to her at all. I know one child died young. The other ones don't really say. I looked on Family Search as well, and all it does is say there were 4 boys and a daughter. Her daughter's name was Anne. She lived from 1754 to 1834. There was Captain James McDonald, who lived from 1757 to 1807. There was Lieutenant Colonel John McDonald, who lived from 1759 to 1831. There was Alexander McDonald, and he was deceased, and John McDonald, who was also deceased.
And this was all from New York, in the New York area?
No, I think they were, I'm not sure where her children ended up.
Okay, just a question.
That's a good question. I'm not sure where her children ended up. Yes, sir.
I've got a question. I've read a lot of, during the Revolutionary War, that she was not in good favor with the Scots in America, since America was a penal colony, and the majority of the Scots were more or less the Patriot side.
Yeah.
And she was, of course, her husband was fighting for the English, and her feelings had turned for the English also.
Yeah.
And that put her in disfavor for a good while. I don't know if you read much about that or not, but the Scots said this was a penal colony for them.
Yeah. And I think they emigrated just to join in the revolution. That's what I'm thinking that Alan McDonald wanted to do. He wanted to show his patriotism and his loyalty. But it didn't work out so well.
Yeah, it backfired.
Yeah.
As far as I know, the Donald clan is the largest clan on record. They have like 21 different tartans Yeah.
That's huge. That's huge. So I hope you all enjoyed that presentation. This is a fabulous book. It was so rich. I could have done another, that was a good 35 minutes. I could have done another at least an hour and a half.
You said there was a dance named after her. Can you perform it for us?
There's a friend.
There's a friend, yeah, I love it. No, I cannot. But I'm sure we can look it up on YouTube and find it. So yeah, there we go.
Well done.